Welcome to my walkthrough of Thunderbirds cooperative game. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not Thunderbirds is really difficult for a cooperative game, and so what I'm going to do is walk you through the easiest level and show you, well, basically how relatively straightforward it is at the easiest level, so that hopefully if you're really struggling, what you can do is take away the basic tactics and take them back to your own games and work your way up through those. And let me just finish master markers in their discard space, because this has been set up to do the never give up variant, and if you're struggling with the game at any level, you should always be playing the never give up variant. So it's set with the introductory scenario. So the first scheme is a level 1, and here it is, and that really isn't very important for the moment, but at some point we will have to deliver 3 tokens, one of these, of the same type to Venus. And we're going to forget about that for now, because that's not the main thing to worry about. I've picked Virgil and Alan to play with, and I'm going to be running it as if it's a 2-player game. This 2 players gives you the least opportunity to make mistakes. As the number of players increases, so there are more and more chances to mess something up really badly. So 2 players tends to be easier, and I suspect that Virgil and Alan are by far the strongest pair of characters. So, first turn, with Alan, we have 3 scenarios we need to deal with. The Cham Cham, which is Europe, Edge of Impact, which is also Europe, and End of the Road, which is an Asia mission. And 2 of them benefit from having Alan present, and one of them, End of the Road, benefits from having Thunderbird 1 present. This one here. This is the easiest one for me to deliver on, so this is what I'm going to start with. So the first thing that I do is use Alan's special power. He can use this once a turn to take a +2 determination counter if he's on board Thunderbird 3, and deposit that there. And then I will immediately transfer him to Thunderbird 1. That doesn't take an action. And then I will fly Thunderbird 1 to Asia. Thunderbird 1 can fly up to 3 spaces. And that's a lot of spaces. Essentially, Thunderbird 1 can travel anywhere on the planet. Now, I can now have a go at the End of the Road disaster. I've got +2 for having Alan and +2 for having Thunderbird 1. I would get a slightly better shot at this by having Virgil present and let him take the action, because he gets a +2 if it's a land rescue, which is green, so that would give me a total of +6. With +6 I would need 3. With +4 I need 5. The magic number you're looking for is 4. You want to get the mission down to a point where you only need to roll a 4 on the dice. That gives you a 26 in 36 chance of passing. There's no point in pushing it lower than that, because any improvement in the odds you get is going to cost you actions, and you'd be better off spending those actions to just roll again and have another go. 5 is the worst odds you should really accept. I'm going to accept them here because I don't really have much alternative to accepting these. I could do with having Thunderbird 2 in North America, Thunderbird 1 in North America, but I can't really arrange that at the moment, so I'm going to do this mission. And I get 5. 5 +2 for Alan, +2 for Thunderbird 2 is 9, which matches the difficulty level on the card. Here's the card. So okay. That succeeds. I've dealt with the end of the road mission. I then get to claim a +2 determination marker and an intelligence marker, which gives me a reroll later in the game. So we dealt with the very first mission, it goes there. That's the end of my actions. Now I turn over the top disaster card. Shelter at Kunlun. So Shelter at Kunlun is a different sort of mission. In these, you don't need to make a dice roll, you just need to get the things listed on the card to the place, which in this case is Asia, and I need to get 3 pod vehicles there. This is actually quite a tough one to get at the start of the game. Here we go, everything shuffles down, it goes into the 1 slot. It's now Virgil's turn. So I need the Thunderizer for Edge of Impact. I need 2 more pod vehicles for Shelter at Kunlun. So I'm going to, first of all, take a green counter. That's Virgil's special power. He can take a green counter once per turn if he's on board Thunderbird 2. I'm then going to immediately spend the green counter to build the Thunderizer. The mole starts built, so that was free. Spending the counter, I can load the Thunderizer and the mole on board Thunderbird 2. That action is free as well. I will then fly Thunderbird 2 to Asia, where I will drop off the mole. I don't need it for the mission that I'm planning to do. Then I will pick up Alan and put him... Nope. John should start the game in Thunderbird 5. Don't know why he was down there. Pick up Alan, and then I can fly to Europe. So that's 3 actions. 1 for the token, 1 to Asia, 1 to Europe. So now I turn over the top card. 30 minutes after noon. And this is the fire episode, if you remember that one. So this is a North American mission. It requires Thunderbird 1 to be present in North America, but it requires the laser cutter to be present in Europe. And this is something you come across with sometimes with the cards, where you need to have one object in one place and another one in another place. Everything shuffles up and it goes into space number 1. So now it's Alan's turn again. And Alan has most of the things everything in place for doing the Edge of Impact mission. So he just straight off starts by trying to roll for that mission. And I get 2. 2 plus 3 for the Thunderizer plus 2 for Alan is 7. And I need an 8. Now this is where these counters come in really useful. You've got 2 choices. You can spend this counter, or you can simply accept you didn't succeed the mission and take another action to roll again. Now, generally speaking, actions are your most valuable resource. So I spend the counter to immediately succeed the Edge of Impact mission, which gives me a counter of my choice. And because I think the thing that we're desperately short of at the moment is vehicles, I'm going to take a green counter. And then I'm immediately going to spend the green counter to build the laser cutter on Tracy Island. Okay. Now, I could attempt the Cham Cham mission. I'd get +2 because Lady Penelope's present, but I don't get any bonus for having Thunderbird 1 here because Thunderbird 1 needs to be in North America for that mission. Now that would give me a 5. And I've got a pretty good chance of succeeding on a 5, but it's not perfect. So what I'm inclined to do is fly Thunderbird 2 to Asia drop off the Thunderizer, leave Virgil on board Thunderbird 2, but put Alan on Thunderbird 1 and fly Thunderbird 1 to North America. Ultimately, we need Thunderbird 1 in North America for a mission in a moment, so it makes sense to go and get it set up now. And then I turn over a card. The card is the Hood Advances. Right? And this will give me a moment to just refer us back to the track. Now, watch what I do with the card. It goes underneath the first disaster. Now remember, that's because I'm playing the Never Give Up variant, and that means I'll be able to replay the whole game if I lose. The Hood advances 1 space on the track here. Now, remember, he's heading towards this. If he gets to this before I foil the scheme by delivering those 3 counters to Venus, he wins. The reason I'm ignoring that is because actually all of the hard work happens here on the disaster track. It's all about keeping this under control. The Hood advances is really secondary to this track. So it's now Virgil's turn. And Virgil's got in place most of the things he actually wants. So what I'm going to do is fly Virgil to Tracy Island, pick up a green token, which I'm then immediately going to spend to build the transmitter truck. It doesn't really matter. Load both the laser cutter and the transmitter truck on board Thunderbird 2. Okay. And then fly Thunderbird 2 to North America. Now, that will get everything in position to attempt the next mission. But, having got there and thinking about it, you get an opportunity, as long as you haven't rolled the dice, to take back your move. And I'm going to think about that one and think, actually, if instead I arrive there with 1 action to attempt the mission, which is 30 minutes after noon, I'll have +2 from having Virgil, as well as +2 from the presence of Thunderbird 1, which will mean I'll only need a 4. Remember what I said earlier, 4 is the magic number you're aiming for. So, take back. We won't get the green counter, and we'll leave the transmitter truck in Brain's notebook. But we will still carry, in fact, we'll leave the laser cutter here as well. I think we will fly directly to North America for 1 move, where we'll then attempt the mission. Right, so we got a 5 on the Hood. So the Hood advances 1 space. We'll resolve that in a second. The 5 +2 for being Virgil, +2 for having Thunder 2 present, is 9, which is enough to succeed that mission. So that mission is turned face down. Remember, we're playing a variant, so the way in which these cards operate is quite important. So that's turned face down. It succeeded. It's no longer a threat to us. Then we get to claim 1 counter of our choice. Now, I am an enormous fan of +2 determination counters. They are your get out of jail free for, oh my god, we needed a better roll than the one we just got. So I take a +2. Turn over the first event card. It's accidental injury. So the current player's character is injured and may not take the rescue action again until they return to Tracy Island. Okay, so that one's not the end of the world. We can live with that one. I'll get the character back to Tracy Island pretty quickly. So that was 1, 2. So I have a 3rd action now. Now I want to leave Thunderbird 1 in place to help with the Cham Cham mission. So what I'm going to do is move Alan to be on board Thunderbird 2 and then fly with him to Tracy Island. Now what's going on here? Well, you've always got to set up the next player's turn. If I left Alan in North America, he'd have to move Thunderbird 1 in order to do anything. So I want him with me on Tracy Island. I've got back to Tracy Island, so now that's it. Virgil is healed. The accidental injury is dealt with. So I take a disaster marker from here and I put it on top of the accidental injury to show that it's no longer in effect. It's the end of the turn, so I turn over a card and I get the Imposters. This mission happens in geostationary orbit. It benefits from having Scott present and having Fab 1 in North America. So it's going to be a little bit of time before we get round to that mission. I move these two up. It's now Alan's turn. So I know what I want to do with Alan. It's just a matter of working out how to actually arrange it. So the first thing I do is I transfer Alan to Thunderbird 3, which doesn't cost anything. I then use his special ability to get a +2 token. I then transfer him back to Thunderbird 2 and load up the laser cutter. Again, none of these things have cost anything. And then, so I've used one action at the moment. 2 actions takes me to Asia, where I have the laser cutter, offload that. I now have the 3 vehicles I have to solve shelter at Kunlun. So I immediately resolve the shelter at Kunlun mission and take a green token for my success. Now, I'm not going to spend the green token to get a pod vehicle because I don't actually know what pod vehicles I'm going to need yet. So that was 1, 2, 3 actions spent. So that's the end of Alan's turn. I turn over a card and I get Signal Overload. And this is a space mission requiring you to get 4 people up to Thunderbird 5. And this is great. This is a really good draw in terms of missions that I could have got, because I've now got 2 space missions right after each other and they both need to be done in geostationary orbit, which is the easiest and closest to get to. So now it's Virgil's turn. And so Virgil wants to do the Cham Cham mission. So move Thunderbird 2 to Europe. And now I've got everything in position. I've got Lady Penelope here. I've got Thunderbird 1 in North America. And I'm ready to do this mission, which requires a +4. Okay. For which I have a +4. Great. So again, I rolled another hood. The hood moves on 1 space. That will become a problem eventually, but it's not a problem at the moment. So I've got 1. I had +2 for now. That's not enough to succeed the mission, which is the point I was about to make. 1 + 2 + 2 is 5, but I've got the +2 counter, and I explained these are gold dust. Right? Every character should be carrying one of those if they can. So I succeed the mission. I take the +2. That goes onto there. That goes onto there. They go onto there. Right? So that was 1, 2 actions, and there we are. Now, I do have another action. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to load Lady Penelope and Fab 1 onto Thunderbird 1, and then I'm going to fly 2 spaces to North America and offload a Desperate Intruder. And this is an African sea mission. Everything shoves along 1 space, and the cards go in there. It's now Alan's turn. So we pick up Scott and put him on Thunderbird 2. Now this is pretty much how you should be running this. You should have most of your characters in the same vehicles, and they should generally be Thunderbird 2 or Thunderbirds 3, both of which can carry 3 people. And this allows, and this would apply even if you're playing a 5-player game, because it allows you to treat a 5-player game much like a 2-player game. You're essentially controlling these 2 vehicles. The other vehicles are useful, but they're not central to the game. We fly everybody back to Tracy Island, which is 1 action. And then I have to make a decision about exactly where I place people. Generally speaking, I like to keep 1 of the players on the ground and put 2 of the players in space. I don't put 1 player in space. And sometimes the space player comes back and deals with things that are on Earth. But generally speaking, I don't like to get both players into. I'm going to transfer just Alan and Scott. I'll leave Virgil behind, so we've still got somebody on the ground. And I'll transfer Gordon. So that's 1 action to get to here. The transfers are all free. Then, second action moves us to geostationary orbit. And then, because of what I need in place, so I've got 4 characters present, and 1 of them is John, so I just automatically succeed on that. Turn the card face down and take a token, bonus action token for it. So it's now the end of the turn. I turn over a disaster card, and we've got the Mineral Eaters. And the Mineral Eaters, there we go, is going to require me to get some stuff to the asteroid belt. So there's plenty of things for me to be dealing with in space. Now, it's Virgil's turn. Virgil doesn't have a lot to do, so I'm going to take the time to take a green token. And then drop Thunderbird 4 into Thunderbird 2 and take 2 actions to fly it to Africa, which is where it's needed for Desperate Intruder. And then that's the end of his turn. So I turn over a card and we get the Hood Advances. Again, notice it goes underneath the first card. And really important this, when the Hood advances, the track doesn't move forward. You effectively get a turn's respite from the disasters. Right, we move to there and we get the event, which is Rocket Malfunction. Now, Rocket Malfunction is pretty terrible. It reduces Thunderbird 3's top speed to 1 until a character in its space discards a green token. Right. And Thunderbird 3's speed is enormously important. Remember, there's a whole bunch of things we have to do in space, and some of them are right the way out at the asteroid belt, which is 3 whole spaces away from where we presently are. Fortunately, that's not going to be a big issue because we have a green token up there. So, but if it, otherwise, we'd have had to coordinate to get Virgil and Thunderbird 3 in the same space so he could generate a green token for it. To get rid of the rocket malfunction. And then I will move Thunderbird 3 1 space to Venus, where I will then discard 3 +2 tokens to solve the Eggs of Arachnid scheme. Now you'll notice I wasn't trying to do that. Right? None of that was planned. I just ended up with the character 1 space away with nearly enough tokens and able to get a 3rd token. And that's really crucial to playing the game. It's realizing what you're doing is solving disasters. Schemes are completely secondary. Right? Now, we were quite unlucky with rolls and numbers coming up, and the Hood got close, right, which he sometimes does on the first scheme, but it's not too bad. So I take a disaster marker and I mark that that succeeded. take a fab card and I place the fab card, there it is, on the right hand side of the board so that everybody can see it. And because I'm a big fan of this, I take my blue token and immediately trade in for another fab card. Right. And that camera detector allows me to move the hood back one space on the hood track or draw a bonus action. And here's the next scheme. It's another space-based one. I need to get intelligence markers to the moon and certain pod vehicles to the North Pacific. But I have 5 whole turns, hood moves, before I get into any trouble on that. And both of my characters now have a reroll marker, so I'm pretty confident about being able to handle anything that comes at me from that direction. So remember, we did a mission in geostationary orbit, we drew an orange token and we moved to Venus. Solving the scheme, unlike dealing with a mission, is not an action. So that's the end of Alan's turn, and we turn over the top disaster card. Signal. Concentrating on the disaster cards, so we've kept those down. There are only 3 spaces along the track. One of them has to get 8 spaces along the track to end the game. This is a critically important thing to remember. That's what you're doing. You are keeping the disaster cards under control. That's your main objective all of the time. And the difficulty of that does not alter from game to game. The event cards that interfere with you, they're all exactly the same at all difficulty levels. The disaster cards themselves, they're all exactly the same at all difficulty levels. Right? Only the scheme cards alter, and they don't have any impact on your ability to deal with the disaster track. So and if you were paying attention, you will notice I missed something in the last turn. Right? Because I should have drawn another disaster card at the end of Virgil's turn. So here's the Virgil's thing, which is Martian invasion. And then at the end of Alan's turn, I draw yet another disaster card. So that's an important rule to remember. And it can make the game a whole lot easier if you forget it. At the end of every player's turn, you draw a card from the top of the disaster deck. Is roll for this, and he gets a 4 and a hood. Now you'll notice I'm getting a lot of these. You should get these about 1 in 3 rolls. If you're getting more than that, you're being a bit unlucky. Right? 4 plus 1 for John and plus 3 for the transmitter truck. Right? Gets us a total of 8, so we succeed the mission. My general rule of thumb is you don't spend a reroll counter if you're going to succeed the mission anyway. Right? Reroll counters are not a good justification for stopping hoods. So we let the hood go on 1 space, especially not when we actually need some of these counters. And then we pick up This is why you've got to be concentrating on the disaster track, because this sort of thing can really easily happen. We went from only having 2 disasters out to being right the way along at 5 disasters down, right? And that's really easy for that to take place. I need to get Alan back down to here. Now there's no vehicles waiting for him. This is always a pain. So what I did in the last couple of moves are not really very efficient moves. Right? There's much more efficient ways you could have arranged that. But you will occasionally get yourself into this mess, especially if you're working with one of the variants where you have a timer on you for how much time you spend on each move. So I will send the whole team down, and I'll have to have a think about this. I need Gordon and John on the ground for bonuses. And I could do with Scott, but Scott I will need in space to deal with the Sun Probe mission. So, and then we've got a final action. Okay, my general rule of thumb is in this situation, unless you're desperately worried about the hood, if you've got a spare action like this, take a fab card and let the hood advance 1 space. And that allows me to move Fab 1's hydrofoils anywhere on Earth. Not that useful at the moment, but I'm sure it will be in a second. Okay. We're into the end game here. So at this stage, what we need to do is complete the red dust settlers. And the reason I say we're into the end game is because we have the 2+2 counters, and we have 3 of the 4 cog counters. So in a sense, we can momentarily discard the disaster track, because as long as we can get everything done in the next 2 turns, we win despite the disasters. So the first thing that we do is we turn over the disaster card at the end of Virgil's turn. We get a hood advances, which has the potential to cause no real upset because he's 2 spaces away from the next event card anyway. So the hood is irrelevant. And this is a really important point. Even though we had some quite bad rolls early on in the game that caused the hood to advance a lot, so we were kind of threatened at the first and second scheme. By this stage in the game, the hood is completely irrelevant to what's going on. Right? The only danger here is that the disaster track is going to kill us in 2 turns. In fact, a hood advance is really good news because it holds off the disaster track from killing us. So it's now Alan's turn. Now, last turn we did that business with picking him up at Tracy Island, so he's now with us in North America, and we need to deliver things to Mars and the North Atlantic. So somebody has to end up in the North Atlantic, and somebody has to end up on Mars, and the person who has to end up on Mars is going to have to be Virgil. We've got the +2s, that's all sorted. Right? Just a question of how we arrange to have the remaining. Okay, we don't need to solve any more disasters from here on in. Right? This is really straightforward from here. We pick up Fab 1 to save ourselves a bit of time and move back to the South Pacific. We then skip our our remaining 2 actions and turn over the top disaster card. Bound for Venus, irrelevant. Shove everything up 1 space. There we go. Then, at the start of Virgil's turn, we drop off Fab 1, we put Alan in Fab 1, and we activate the Fab 1 Hydrofoils card to immediately move Fab 1 to the North Atlantic. Then we climb on board Thunderbird 3. Before we climb on Thunderbird 3, we use our special action for being on Thunderbird 2 to draw another green token. Then we climb onto Thunderbird 3, and we immediately move Thunderbird 3 spaces to Mars, where we have 4 green tokens from Virgil, and the North Atlantic, where we have 2 determination tokens from Scott for Alan, and that's the end of the game. We've won. Right? Okay, I hope this was useful if you've been looking at the game and wondering about strategy. And if you want to kind of think about where we went on that, there were essentially 2 phases to the game. In the opening phase, which is the majority of the game, all you're doing is concentrating on the disaster cards, and occasionally as you're working along you will spot that you've got the pieces in the right place to go and deal with one of the schemes, and the disasters are not a threat to you at the time, so you can go and do that. At the very, very end of the game switches over. There comes to a point where you've got enough pieces to deal with the final scheme card, and it's purely how many turns do you have before the disaster track gets out of hand. And if you can do it in that space, then you stop worrying about the disaster track and start worrying about the rest. I hope some of that was useful to people.